In the dark reaches of the galaxy, the Zorvani Dominion reigned supreme. For centuries, they had expanded from star to star, conquering countless civilizations with swift precision and unshakable confidence. Born and bred for battle, the Zorvani believed no species could match their strength, strategy, or advanced weaponry. When their long-range scouts reported a small blue planet orbiting a quiet sun, inhabited by a noisy, scattered species called humans, the High Command barely blinked. They called it a cleanup mission. No formal battle plan was needed. Earth was to be taken in a matter of days. Resistance swept aside like dust beneath their armored boots. The invasion was set. Massive Zorvani warships pierced Earth's atmosphere, splitting the sky over Europe and Asia. In bold formation, they landed across major cities, expecting surrender or chaos, but found something neither expected nor familiar. The humans did not run in terror. They did not beg for mercy. Instead, they vanished into shadows, into forests, into ruins. And then they struck. The first ambush came in the Carpathian Mountains. A Zorvani patrol unit was picked off one by attackers they couldn't see. Landmines. The aliens thought primitive turned out to be laced with stolen Zorvani tech, used in ways no Dominion engineer had imagined. In Tokyo, Zorvani drop squads were confused by a communication blackout. Their targeting systems scrambled. They fired into empty buildings, only to have human drones circle them from behind, dropping small explosives that disabled their suits. In Pakistan, a battalion found itself lured into the Kurthar range, thinking it had cornered local resistance. Instead, the humans triggered a rock slide and sealed them inside. All across Earth, the pattern repeated. Trap after trap, strike after strike. What should have been a swift conquest became a creeping nightmare. General Zahn, one of the Dominion's most experienced field commanders, stood at the center of a shattered command tent in Berlin. He studied a glowing map, full of blinking red signals, each one representing a lost unit. "They fight like animals," he growled, his voice deep and gravelly. "Predictable. Wild. We've broken better than them." His officers nodded, but unease hung in the air. They had seen the footage. They had read the reports. The humans were not using standard military tactics. They fought from rooftops and underground tunnels, coordinated strikes across continents in minutes, and changed their patterns faster than the Zorvani could adapt. They used old weapons alongside stolen alien gear, fused together with reckless ingenuity. They spoke in codes the Dominion couldn't crack, moved through cities like ghosts, and vanished before drones could trace them. This was not a population panicking under the weight of invasion. This was a world fighting for its survival. Deep beneath the ruins of a power station in Eastern Europe, a group of human leaders gathered in silence. Generals, hackers, scientists, and soldiers, people who had once served different flags, now sharing one goal. A rough map of Earth glowed on the wall, marked with invasion zones and resistance cells. Plans were being written not just to fight, but to adapt, to learn, to win. The humans had already reverse-engineered parts of Zorvani tech and were building strategies around it. They were not only defending their planet, they were preparing for something far greater. "They think we're animals," a young commander whispered, eyes fixed on the map. "Let them think that. It will be their first mistake." And somewhere, out in the black skies above, more Zorvani ships were arriving, bringing reinforcements, expecting easy victory. None of them realized that the true war had just begun. The Zorvani believed they understood combat, but Earth was about to teach them what it truly meant to fight. The world had never truly been united, not until the skies filled with fire and strange warships cast shadows over every nation. But as the Zorvani invasion spread, humanity began to change, not just in tactics, but in spirit. Countries with long histories of conflict sat at the same table. Military generals who once stared each other down across tense borders now shared intelligence, supplies, and strategy. The Earth Defense Pact, or EDP, was born not from politics, but from necessity. Soldiers from every continent trained side by side, learning each other's strengths, combining centuries of battlefield knowledge into something new, something the aliens had never encountered. The Zorvani, trained in structured combat, came, expecting to face traditional armies, expecting formations and predictable responses. What they found instead was a war they didn't recognize. Explosions tore through their patrol routes, devices crafted from scavenged alien tech, jury-rigged by human engineers who didn't care about elegance, only effectiveness. In one region, a wrecked Zorvani walker became the base of a deadly trap that destroyed an entire convoy. In another, human agents hijacked Dominion comm systems, sending eerie messages in the aliens' own language, distorting their orders and feeding false coordinates that led units into ambushes or off cliffs. Zorvani soldiers began to fear the static hum of their radios, unsure if what they heard was real or a human trick. High above, Earth's satellites were no longer just for weather or communications. They became tools of war. Hackers in underground bunkers used old satellites to track enemy movements, guiding local fighters through earpieces to strike at just the right moment. In the Arctic, squads lured Zorvani into frozen valleys, then triggered landslides. In dense cities, resistance groups attacked from sewer tunnels and rooftops, disappearing into the maze of structures before any counterattack could be organized. It wasn't a war of strength. It was a war of pressure, surprise, and constant change. The Zorvani had studied Earth's outdated military archives. What they faced now was something never written in any manual. Their losses grew, whole platoons vanished. Heavy armor units stalled in forests where roads had been destroyed and bridges rigged to collapse. Their best tacticians couldn't predict, the humans who seemed to fight without rules. And yet, everything was precise, just chaotic enough to confuse, just clever enough to kill. For the first time in generations, Zorvani warriors bled. Their elite troops pulled from the front lines after facing brutal defeats, not from superior firepower, but from traps, timing, and sheer unpredictability. The Dominion had built an empire on discipline and honor. But here, on this planet, war had a different face. In a ruined tower overlooking what was once a major European city, a Zorvani officer watched footage of his fallen squads. His eyes, sharp and trained, scanned the patterns, searching for reason, for logic. But he found none. The humans struck like ghosts, rarely the same way twice, always learning, always faster the next time. He turned to his second-in-command, his voice low with disbelief. "They treat war like an art form. No honor, no formality." His officer said nothing for a long time, then replied, "No, they treat war like survival." And that was the truth that frightened them the most. This wasn't a species looking for glory or conquest. These humans were cornered, and cornered creatures fought differently. They fought with desperation, with fury, and with a terrifying clarity. The Zorvani had studied warriors. What they were now facing were survivors. Fighters, shaped not by conquest, but by a long history of struggle, of adaptation, and of refusing to give in. Somewhere deep in Earth's command centers, the next phase of resistance was already being written. But for the Dominion, this war had become something they no longer understood. And the worst part was, they knew it. The Zorvani, growing frustrated by unexpected defeats and mounting losses, finally changed their strategy. Realizing that standard tactics were failing against humanity's unpredictable resistance, they deployed their elite warriors, highly trained soldiers known as the Kar-Zul, feared across the galaxy for their precision and ruthlessness. These units were faster, more brutal, and carried experimental weapons designed to crush resistance swiftly. Coordinated strikes began across Earth's major resistance zones, each mission carefully calculated to dismantle human strongholds. But even the Kar-Zul were not prepared for what they encountered. Humanity, scattered yet united, had learned too quickly. Their commanders now operated like chess masters, always 3 moves ahead. Feigned retreats drew Zorvani squads into dead zones where the ground itself was rigged with explosives. In burned villages, hollowed-out buildings disguised automated turrets. In jungles and canyons, decoys lured enemies away from real troop movements. Every nationality brought its own legacy to the fight. American unpredictability, Chinese patience, Nigerian ambush expertise, Indian strategic depth, and Brazilian jungle warfare blended into a single, global doctrine that could not be tracked or predicted. The Zorvani expected brute resistance, but what they got was a chaotic living storm of human ingenuity, ever changing, ever learning. Then came the operation that turned the tide. Codenamed Embervale, it was designed not for the battlefield, but for the heart of the enemy's invasion. Network. In the cold silence before dawn, a multinational team of human operatives, trained in silence and sacrifice, prepared to infiltrate a Zorvani command ship stationed in low orbit. The ship controlled most of the alien communication and logistics on the planet. Using stolen Zorvani armor and modified shuttle parts, the team launched into the sky, flying blind through radar gaps created by human hackers on the ground. They slipped aboard the enemy ship by posing as injured reinforcements. For 12 minutes, they moved in total silence, bypassing guards and security systems with speed and precision. And then, in the ship's power core, they planted the EMP device, small, unstable, and cobbled together from alien parts and human engineering. It was risky. One wrong move would have destroyed them all. But it worked. The pulse that followed wasn't just a shockwave. It was a scream that echoed across the planet. Zorvani command centers went dark. Ground troops lost contact. Weapon systems stalled. Coordination broke. In the chaos, human resistance cells struck everywhere, not missing a second. Cities once under siege lit up with counterattacks. The sky filled with smoke, fire, and victory songs, shouted by exhausted soldiers who had been waiting for this chance. In orbit, aboard the main Zorvani fleet ship, the High Council watched in disbelief as their systems crashed one by one. Their maps were blank. Their orders couldn't be sent. Their elite units were calling for backup, only to find silence. A commander slammed his fist against the console. This was meant to be a pacification. How are they winning? He demanded, as alarms screamed and the holograms of Earth flickered. No one answered him. The truth was clear to all. The humans weren't fighting for dominance or power. They weren't trying to prove anything. They were simply protecting what was theirs. And that, more than any weapon or tactic, made them unstoppable. The Zorvani had studied wars, strategies, and past victories, but they had never studied love for home, for family, for survival. Humanity had become ghosts in the smoke, unseen, unpredictable, and unbreakable. And now, for the first time in generations, the conquerors were being conquered, not by a stronger force, but by a force that refused to lose. The silence in orbit was the beginning of the end. After the success of Operation Embervale, the Zorvani lost control of their communication systems, and with it, their tight grip on Earth. Their command. Ships, once proud symbols of fear, now floated helplessly as human forces took back territory mile by mile. With their orbital advantage broken and resistance on Earth growing stronger by the day, the Zorvani High Command made a difficult decision. They would begin evacuating their outer colonies and retreat to fortified systems deeper in their territory. It was meant to be temporary, a regrouping, but humanity saw it as something else, an opening. For the first time in modern history, Earth's warriors left their own skies behind. Covert strike teams were formed, made up of the toughest soldiers, brilliant engineers, and scientists hardened by war. Using captured Zorvani ships and engines, modified with human systems, they launched their own missions into space, not to escape, but to hunt. These teams operated in silence, flying through asteroid belts and plasma storms where no Dominion sensors could reach. One by one, Zorvani supply lines vanished. Entire outposts went dark. Fleets disappeared without warning, ambushed in the shadows of moons, or torn apart in surprise attacks from nebulae cloaked in magnetic interference. The humans didn't just follow their enemies, they outthought them. They laid traps that turned natural hazards into weapons. One mission, led by a group of African and Eastern European commandos, lured a Dominion battleship into a dense gas cloud, where they detonated a series of small charges that created lightning storms strong enough to fry the ship's core systems. Another strike team from South America used a hacked Zorvani navigation beacon to redirect a convoy straight into an uncharted asteroid field, erasing it without ever firing a shot. Each mission was a message. Humanity would not stay grounded, and with every success, the morale of the Zorvani crumbled further. Their soldiers, once proud and sure of their superiority, began to hesitate. They questioned orders, feared shadows, and doubted their training. This war had become something they did not recognize. Their old methods, so effective against other species, had no effect on humans, who refused to fight by the rules. The Dominions, pride, built over centuries of conquest, now worked against them. They could not accept that these so-called foreigners, once viewed as primitives, had become a force that reached across the stars and struck with purpose. In hidden Zorvani, or councils, the tone shifted. No longer did they speak of victory. Now they spoke of survival. Some generals argued for peace, others for retreat, but none had answers for what they were facing. The humans had learned fast, and they had learned well. They didn't conquer for glory or resources. They fought for something deeper. Each battle powered by the memory of lost cities, fallen families, and a planet that refused to be ruled. They had turned Zorvani technology into tools of revenge and built strategies out of desperation and brilliance. The Zorvani, once the teachers of war, had become the students, and every lesson they received came at the cost of their own blood. Back on Earth, command centers tracked every raid, every lost enemy ship. Plans for the final push were already in motion, but in the quiet corners of space, where stars shimmered cold and silent, the war was being won not by numbers or machines, but by the stubborn will of a species that refused to die quietly. This was no longer just resistance. It was retaliation, and for the Zorvani, extinction no longer felt like a distant concept. It felt like a growing shadow. Above the blue curve of Earth, where the sky met the stars, the final battle had begun. The last of the Zorvani armada stood in formation, a fleet of massive silver-black warships, scarred by months of fighting, but still powerful. Their weapon systems hummed with energy, and their shields glowed like walls of fire. Facing them was a very different sight, the united human fleet. It was not perfect. The ships were uneven, many of them patched together from old Earth vessels and captured Zorvani tech. Some looked barely spaceworthy, burn marks and dents still fresh from past battles. Yet behind each ship was something the Zorvani had never fully grasped: willpower. Humanity had come from every nation, every language, every background, bound by one cause: survival. What stood between Earth and destruction now was not a polished army, but a force that had learned through pain, through loss, through endless adaptation. As the fleets closed in, the stars lit with fire, lasers streaked across the void, missiles danced like comets, and ships on both sides began to fall. But the humans didn't break formation. They adapted in real time, trading positions, switching, power to shields, using debris fields as cover. Small fighter teams weaved between enemy ships, dodging weapons fire with impossible precision. Zorvani tactics, once feared across galaxies, failed to control the chaos that humans brought. For every hit they landed, the humans struck back harder, and then came the move no one expected. Amid the largest clash, as the Zorvani flagship pushed through the center of the battlefield, a small cluster of damaged human ships suddenly broke off. The aliens saw it as retreat, but it was a trap. Hidden among those ships was a boarding unit, human marines trained for zero-gravity combat, wearing armor built from captured Zovani suits and reinforced with Earth's best tech. They launched, in silence, riding in stealth pods that attached directly to the flagship's hull. Before the Zovani crew could react, the Marines breached the outer walls and stormed the corridors, spreading through the massive ship like a wildfire. Gunfire echoed through alien halls and explosions ripped through systems from the inside. The Zovani had never imagined humans would dare board their command vessel. Not during a battle of this scale, not when the odds were against them. But that was the key. Humanity never followed expected paths. In the heart of the ship, the human squad fought their way to the bridge. Resistance was fierce, but the Marines moved with purpose, covering each other, pressing forward. They weren't just trying to destroy the ship, they were trying to end the war. As smoke filled the command deck and power systems failed, the Zovani commander, old, strong, and once undefeated, fell to the ground, wounded by a blast. He lay near the shattered viewport, watching the Earth below, the stars beyond, and the humans who had taken his bridge. He spoke with disbelief, voice weak and cracked. "They weren't supposed to win," he muttered. "We are warriors." A human captain, armor cracked and face smeared with ash, stood over him. Breathing, heavy but still standing, he looked down at the alien and replied, not with hatred, but with something deeper. "You thought you understood combat," he said quietly. "You never understood survival." All across orbit, the remaining Zovani forces faltered. With their flagship lost and command broken, many surrendered, others fled. The human fleet, though battered and bruised, held position. They had done what no other species had managed. They had pushed back the Dominion and stood tall in the face of extinction. Earth was still scarred, its people forever changed. But they had earned something powerful, the respect of the galaxy, and the knowledge that no invader would ever see them as weak again. They had bled, they had fought, and in the end, they had won. Not because they were stronger, but because they refused to give up. The stars now held their story, written in courage, fire, and the unbreakable will of humanity.